So in the getting started with Firebase tutorial that I have online, there's the link to, or setting up Firebase. There's a link to most of this code. I will need to update it very soon because I've made some interesting changes to it. But we're going to start off almost from scratch here. And the very first thing I'm going to do is actually create a sample JSON basically that stores that information that we talked about over there. So I'm going to take all this good stuff and then literally create a new JavaScript file called trip planner JS. And I can just make a variable called one trip. So this is only for our own purposes, we're not going to actually use it as code. It's just visually this will help us a lot. So creator ID will be some random value. Trip ID would also be some random value. Now, time created, this is a tough one. There's like so many different standards of storing a date. Since we're doing this in JavaScript though, the best is to utilize basically what's called a timestamp of time elapsed since whatever it was called. And to way to see what that looks like, you make a new date, and we say get the exact time, which there it is. Does that look familiar to you guys? No? This is it generates like the milliseconds since this date. Yeah, since January 1st, 1970. So the number of milliseconds elapsed since January 1st. That's what we utilize for storing a date. And then it's easily convertible back to a real date with either just JavaScript itself. You literally say new date and you pass that same number. And look at what it returns. Tuesday, May 15th, 2018 at 8:36 p.m. Right? So it has the full date stored in here. And then using something, the best tool out there is called moment.js. And that allows you to pass in almost any humanly possible date inside of these quotes, and then format it like using these formats in anything you want it to show to the user. So this is what we typically utilize for that. So keep that in mind for time tracking. So time created, this timestamp, title is trip to Barcelona, whatever. Description, have fun. Start date. No, let's just use the same timestamp for now. Okay, so collaborators, this is where it gets fun, right? What we want to store is potentially a list of either the email. So here's my email because I'm not a user yet, let's say. Or if they're a user, then some kind of unique ID. And I guess the way we would actually check if they are like a part of the trip or not is we would look for this @ symbol maybe, or a dot, I don't know, like @ and then a dot. It's not ideal. Here's the alternative. You could actually store an array of objects, and then when you invite the person, maybe you want to say what their name is. So it'd be like Angel G, and then you can store their email. And then you could say something like accepted, true or false, right? And once they do accept it, we would get their user ID as well. That would be a lot easier than having to do the whole crazy checking of is it there or not. And maybe if they do accept, then you just store the ID. Who knows? Seems about right. Great. And it's an array, right? So we can store an object here as the first item, and the second item can actually be just a string. And the array don't care. It can store anything. Very flexible. And then events would be definitely an array of objects. Location. As to location, kind of a tough one, right? If they store just some random name like the left side of the city, then we can't map it onto map. So number of options are here. For example, one option is there are plenty of databases out there which will give you a JSON object basically that then you can add to a field to do autocomplete. And as soon as you start typing the name of the location, it could suggest cities, and it would only allow them to add an existing city or something. There's actually also a really good, I just remembered, there's a really good Google Maps API, which is, as they type, will suggest not just a city, but literally every business and location in those cities, which then would convert to a real, latitude, whatever that was, location. So this would be some kind of an autocomplete that stores the name of the location, so some bar in Barcelona, and then it will store the coordinates as XY. Those would be what is the latitude and longitude? Yeah. And start, date, time, end, date, time. And for an event, we can actually add as well notes, which would look like this: created by ID and content. Oh, and time. Great. There's a note, and we've created an event. Conversations. Created by, content, timestamp, likes, all that good stuff. And we can skip tests for now. There's our JSON object. And if I do this magical combination of keys, it will hopefully make it pretty. I guess we did a really good job making it pretty. So this is going to be a reference guide as we're creating all the functionality, referencing back and forth. And consistency is always key. Otherwise you're like, why isn't it working? So we're going to start with lowercase. Do you know what camel case is? It's basically where each word after the first has a camel, which is a capital. And there's a typo. Converse. Oh, con. Okay, that looks good. Cool. So now we have the basics of an event. So we're going to create, I'm going to just copy my items HTML and call it trip planner. So we can start off with a good base here. And the JavaScript will be trip planner.js. Because this already has like adding an item and doing all that fun stuff. So save us some time. If you guys don't remember how to do all that stuff with Firestore, there's that video we recorded from Saturday you can watch, and it covers all these. So real quick recap, basically this code is given to you by Firestore. You just add that code and then you have access to the database. If we open it up here, which project is it? My my first project. Okay. We can go to the database and we'll see that I have 3 collections of items. Items test zebra. I'm going to create a new one called trips. And something really cool, if you don't want to do that whole JSON thing that we did in here, you could actually do it all in here visually. So like deciding what type of an item you're storing, what's the name, what's the value, and so on. So that's pretty great. Oh, I guess you need to add an item for it to exist, but all right, so here's our trips. We can delete that one once we create our first trip. So let's do that. Let's change wherever we're adding an item to not use the collection items. Instead, it's going to use the collection called trips. And let's add this trip right here. Oh, I could just take that variable, pass it into adding an item. And this will create a trip as soon as I create something. So let's go trip planner.html. So even though like here you click add item and it asks for tests, these are no longer connected. I manually overwrote them to add the new data, so this doesn't really matter. And let's see. What do you know? There's our trip. And this is also cool if you guys want to visually see what it looks like, obviously, outside of the editor. So now I can delete that sample first one I created. And we need to replace, when we actually get, right now we're getting all the items instead of the trips. So where are we getting the data? Populate items, collection, trips. And each time we add one, we add it to the items list. That looks good. So let's actually display some of the data from the trip itself so we can visually see what we have. Okay. And this is how we add an item into the UI. We are storing the title, description. So let's see, does it have a title? It does have a title. It also has a description. That's pretty great. It's actually sufficient. Let's see what it looks like then. Trip to Barcelona. There it is. So now if we actually click edit, this actually should, in theory, work correctly. Oh, nope, we just messed up. All right, let's just replace all the places where we're saying items and replace it with trips. Hopefully that does the trick. All right, edit Barcelona Z. There it is, Barcelona Z. Let's see if we broke something. Yep, we erased all the other fields. Not a big deal. Let's see why that happened, right? When you edit an item, what I'm doing is I'm taking the I'm going through each of the fields and then I'm looking for the equivalent form field that has the name. So here's what we have to do. Got it. We're going to store that whole trip and so for each, yeah, we're going to store the value here. And once we're done making, oh, that's edit item. We're looking for update item. Sorry. Okay, this is what it's doing. Update item gets passed in, update item, and then it sets it. So we need to find out where that's being called from. There it is. So here's the problem. It's taking the form, which only has 2 fields, and serializing into a JSON object, which has only 2 fields. So here we can actually store so nowhere are we actually passing in the full object. This is where their documentation gets really handy. They actually have exactly how you update an existing item if you just had the ID, which we obviously have because we're changing it. And that's going to help a lot because it first gets it, then you just add the new things that you've changed, and then you kind of save it again, which is really, really useful. Why that's much better than me trying to actually get the value from what we've already gotten from the server. What if somebody made a change and then you clicked edit and you spent a bunch of time editing the item and then they've changed some other fields? Well, as soon as you click save, it'll take your edit page, all the values, and then override their values. So this way, if we get it fresh from the database and only update the fields that you entered, it should be a better end result. So we go to the documentation and look at, let's see, add managed data, query data, and there it is. So here's what this is doing. It's getting the specific item, right? So this would be trips and then the actual ID of the trip. And then it runs this transaction where first it checks if that actual document exists and it gets its value. Then we take the value and overwrite it with, like, let's say we're adding just a number to the population of something, and then we use this transaction update where we're only passing in the fields we want to change. So this is what we need. Let's copy that whole thing. Go back to our update. And okay. Here we already have the actual reference to the exact document. So we're going to replace it up here. And this is the data we want to update. So let's erase all that good stuff. So right here, we're passing in we're calling the update instead of edit entirely. So this is going to only change those fields that we passed in. We don't need that. Cool. Now that should actually do what we want it to do. Let's add one more trip, which will add that full trip data. And we can delete the old one. Cool. All right. I always like to sanity check in the database. Okay, there it is. It has all the fields, right? So now, when we actually change just the title to ZZZ, are you done? It updates it here, and it's updated. Where's trip name? There it is. Trip name ZZZ. So we only updated that specific portion, right? Cool. So we're going to utilize that same exact logic we're going to just use this function called update item. Every time we want to add a new note, a new event, you would just pass in, you'd get the existing, we actually could use this. So the events are stored in an array, right? So here events are in an array and we have one event. So to add to an array we use push, right? So let's say we want to add a new event. We would say new event list. We'd get the data, we then get the events list, and we'd say push. And here we could add a new event, which we can steal from here. So let's make this having fun. Okay, so now when we do any update, it's actually going to just push that event every single time, so it can get at it a bunch of times. But let's try it out first. So we're actually doing update item needs to have dot events equals new event list. Okay, now it'll work. We'll click edit. We change the title for fun. And if we look at our database, now there should be 2 events. Still we have the number 2. That didn't, something happened there. What happened? Let's just sanity check and see exactly what's being stored there. Okay, to test, we're going to just add a whole new trip. Click edit. Okay. Events. There's 0, the first event, called Bar in Barcelona, and there's a second event we just created, which this has everything except for the title, it seems like. No, it has location, right? Having fun. Yeah, so it's got everything. Oh, it even has notes. There's the notes that we changed to say something else. So now we can potentially add events whenever we want. We would have to create another function to handle that. Let's not do it at this time. So we just keep the updating functionality there. Next on the list is, we can add an item, we can update an item. Now we need to get like a list of the trips you have access to. So here's what my thought process was. Basically, we have our database which has these unique IDs for each trip, right? That's how we reference a specific trip. What we want to do is also store a whole new collection called like users. And in here, we would store stuff like, for example, like first and last name. We could store also a list of trips as an array, which then has those unique IDs. And instead of doing a random doc name, we're actually going to use the exact user ID of the person that logged in. So when you log in with Firebase, it gives you their unique ID. So we would store that in here so that when they log into your system, it goes to the user's database, gets that exact entry for that user, goes to the list of trips, and then it could actually query and get each one of those trips from the trips database. So pull all the trips from there and show them. So when you get invited, basically when you log in or accept the invitation, we just add that to your list of trips and you have access to it. And so if you remove them from it, then you just take it out of their users trip list. So that will be how we handle getting that list of trips, inviting a user, I guess another great idea here is for users, like if you invited um, somebody, what you can do is you can create in the users thing, you can create an actual like their email address here, and then store maybe the name that you said that's their name, so they can get the nice email. And we could say trips, because what if like you create 2 trips and you invite them to both, right? This would be great because as soon as they log in, they already have access to those trips, and they're good to go. And then you would just, I'm not sure if you can change the name of the document. You have to look at the documentation, but you could just take this information from this object, from the email address, create a new entry here with the unique user ID, and delete the old entry that had their email address when they actually sign up. And yep, that's really most of it. As I said, there's great little API. Let me show you what that looks like. I should have an account here. So if I go to events, then I can add a new one. So here where it says venue, notice when I start typing Hollywood Bowl, like see how like all these different locations are coming up? And then as soon as I select it, oops. I don't know what's happening here. Unfortunately, this software was never launched, but it used to work. Anyways, let's inspect it. Maybe we can figure out if this will tell us what it's using. Yep, VS Google autocomplete establishment geocode, and it's really cool because they allow you to just actually just add an address manually. So this would be a great way to do that. You could also add an address manually. So you can search for an address like 123 Main Street. So that's great. Like if you like, for example, don't see the business, then you can go in Google and find the actual like business, and then when you type it in here, you'll have a good reference. So yeah, I'm sure there's like tons of plugins that allow you to handle the Google venue thing. Or sorry, if we just search for this, I'm sure we'll find. There it is. So there's a demo, it shows you the features, how to install it, demo with the validator. Let's try his demo, maybe it works a little bit better. There it is. Denver Airport. So it validates it to see if it's like a real address or not. It stores the model, which I'm assuming that's like this address, maybe? But for some reason, it's not telling us, like, we clicked airport, right? It's not storing that value. There it is. So strange that I can't. Okay. So yeah, play with this. There's a bunch of other plugins that do similar stuff. And on the calendar side of things, let's look at some. So I guess for the notes, I was trying to figure that one out. For the notes, are you going to associate them with a specific time of the day, or are they just a list of notes of that day?
They would probably have to do time tracking if they wanted to have like the time tracking, right? So it'd be mapped out.
Oh, okay, so they would be integrated with the time tracking thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was like a general like daily type of notes for the given day.
Well, I wanted to expand it so that it would be able to do like So it wouldn't just be like one line of notes. It'd be more like you could write like summaries and stuff. So you could go back to those notes, expand them. So I was looking at the form stuff that you were talking about yesterday. So I thought that might be promising. And then being able to go back to like your various titles and like expand upon them, potentially drag and drop them to new fields if you feel like you need to move them. Pretty much.
Check out toggle.io, I think. Wait. Why do I have to sign up? Can I just see the website?
Yeah, same thing.
Let's see. toggl.com. Okay, there it is. So, pretty sure you could use it for free. Features, pricing. But my girlfriend absolutely dies for their time tracking.
Yeah, it's like graphics. Your graphics would be.
Yeah. But here's what she likes. So basically, you just start the little like thing, right? She liked that you don't have to like type in the title right away or do anything like that. You can just kind of click start, and then I believe when you're done, you can describe it at any time. Or I think when you're done, it adds the entry, and then you can later on add the description, like, hey, I did this, and it tells you here between 9:05 p.m. and 6 p.m. So, and you can resume this task, right? You can click play again, and it'll continue tracking it. And I'm assuming if I stop it, this will say, what do it do actually? It has 2 entries now, I guess. See, it will show you when you started the first time and ended it, and when you started it the second time. So kind of keep a log of each time you started and ended it. This is pretty cool. So this is a great I think they've really nailed the simplicity of being able to track your time for the day as a good reference point. And what's great if you end up using Firestore is that if you start a timer, like, on your computer and then you're out and about and you go to the phone, you can then click stop and you can actually see it actively updating. So it's pretty cool too.
Do you think the calendar should be the first part of the interface that we're looking at, or would it be, because ideally you go to it and then you just start right away and I'd access it, and then maybe the calendar would be off to the side but like come out, because the function of it is so that you have accessibility to your memories, I guess, your thoughts and your memories.
Right.
It's supposed to be super accessible, and you're supposed to be able to always enter more into it.
Well, you gotta like basically outline your target audience, right? Is it people that are tracking their workday? Is it people that are tracking just their overall day? That helps answer a lot of questions for the UI. Like, is the calendar the most important factor? Is that something that's going to be taking up most of the space? Is it going to be the list of the things you've done that day? Which element you focus on is always about what are you trying to solve, right? It always has to be like what's being solved for who. So if I'm a business owner and I'm using it to track my overall day, then yeah, I'd say the list of entries that you're tracking for that day will be much more visible than each day. And yeah, you'd use the calendar only as a way to maybe navigate back to see what maybe previous days were. And if it's like even not that small, but like let's say about 30% of the screen, it could also display like the total amounts of time worked. And if you have like a high screen, then it could put in maybe some of the entries you did. And it could be responsive, where depending on the size of the screen, it shows more or less items.
Okay.
It's very straightforward. Chris, remind me to send you the latest thing I was working on. I'll show you. So this I was working before class on. It's basically like here it would show you like the list of trips, right? You get out a new one.
Yeah.
And the cool thing was that it took me some time, but when you click on a specific trip, let's say, it passes the unique ID to the URL, and then it can load that trip. So if you copy and paste this link, into a new browser or whatever, it would know to load that trip for you, and stuff. So it has like the login system integrated as well, and you can notice how the URLs are changing, right? So this is a very dynamic little app.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna update it online at some point, but maybe I can send it to you before that. Did you find final theme that you set on?
Yeah, I don't have it. It's on Bootstrap somewhere, but after you were talking about the website today, I figured obviously WordPress is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, it's the best way to go for sure. Yeah.
So in that case, I haven't got anything started, but I do have themes somewhere in here, and then the ones that I emailed you
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
specific thing. But I think this might have been the basic header here or stuff that I'm looking carousel. And just like edit the buttons in a specific way. Well, I'm gonna throw that together now. I should have something really down.
They have this for WordPress?
I don't know. I just started looking at WordPress and stuff
Well,
right now.
can you click on view team info on the top left of the page?
Well, basically, I have some stuff from, what's
What's the name of
what
the
I'm
theme
gonna
actually?
do is when I get a WordPress
Incline. Can you
server
Google
installed,
incline WordPress theme?
I'm just gonna go and leave the website just like you can. You ask for it. I kinda wanna scrap the whole ball.
Yeah, I want to.
What he's doing right now, basically it's already there. You just customize it. Yeah, I think WordPress is the way to go.
Honestly, if you watch the tutorial from today,